We think we know how World War II ended. Trials at Nuremberg, justice served, case closed. But what about the neighbors who whispered names to the Gestapo, the shopkeepers who pointed fingers, the clerks who filed denunciation letters? Millions of ordinary Germans fed the Nazi surveillance machine. When the bombs stopped falling and the camps opened, these informants melted back into everyday life. Most faced no trials, no punishment, no reckoning. What happened to them? How did a nation pretend its army of snitches never existed? If you value documented historical research like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the German Federal Archives and Stasi Records Archive. Now, back to the story. The numbers tell the story. By 1945, the Gestapo employed just 32,000 agents across the entire German Reich, 83 million people under watch. The math doesn't work, unless you count the volunteers. Historians estimate between 2 and 4 million Germans regularly informed for the Nazi state. Shop owners reported customers making jokes about Hitler. Apartment building superintendents tracked who came and went. Teachers noted which students missed Nazi youth meetings. Postal workers steamed open letters. The Gestapo didn't need to be everywhere. German citizens brought the information to them. Take Hamburg, population 1.7 million. Gestapo office, 43 agents. But the files show over 15,000 denunciation letters submitted by citizens between 1933 and 1945. Neighbors reporting neighbors, friends betraying friends. The system worked because people made it work. When British tanks rolled through Hamburg in May 1945, those 43 Gestapo agents faced arrest, war crimes, trials, prison sentences. But what about the 15,000 letter writers? They went home, made dinner, tucked their children into bed. The Allies had bigger problems than tracking down every German who'd written a denunciation letter. The strategy was pragmatic. Denazification focused on party leaders, SS officers, concentration camp guards, high-value targets, the machinery of genocide. But the surveillance network? Too vast, too embedded. American occupation officials estimated that prosecuting every informant would require putting 20% of the German population on trial. Impossible. The new West German state needed functional citizens, not a nation of prisoners, so the files got buried? Literally. In 1946, American forces ordered the destruction of most local Gestapo records. Denunciation letters went into furnaces. Informant lists disappeared. The evidence vanished, taking the informants' names with it. Clean slate, fresh start, but some records survived. Hidden in basements, forgotten in filing cabinets. When researchers finally accessed these fragments in the 1970s and 80s, they found the same names appearing in post-war employment roles, police departments, civil service, teaching positions. The informants had simply continued their lives. Consider the case of Wilhelm Kube, a mid-level Nazi administrator who'd managed informant networks in occupied Belarus. After the war, he reinvented himself as a democracy advocate, joined the Christian Democratic Union, won election to the Bundestag in 1949, served 12 years in parliament before his past caught up, no consequences, just a quiet retirement, or Maria Schneider, a Gestapo secretary who'd processed thousands of denunciation letters in Munich. The war ended. She found work as a school administrator, 30-year career, full pension. When journalists tracked her down in 1978, she claimed she'd just been following orders, doing her job. The standard defense. The pattern repeated across Germany. Former informants became judges, police officers, teachers, civil servants. They occupied positions of trust in the new democratic state. Their past remained buried under bureaucratic silence and social amnesia. East Germany told a different story. The communist state claimed to have purged all fascist elements. Clean break with the Nazi past. But Stasi records tell another tale. When the secret police recruited informants in the 1950s and 60s, they found experienced candidates, people who'd already learned to watch and report. Former Gestapo informants made ideal Stasi collaborators. Same skills, new masters. The psychology ran deeper than ideology. Informing becomes a habit, a way of relating to authority, of feeling important, useful, protected. The Nazi state had trained millions of Germans to see surveillance as civic duty. That training didn't disappear with Hitler's death. Take the town of Würzburg, population 60,000. During the Nazi years, Gestapo records show over 4,000 residents submitted denunciation reports. That's 1 in 15 adults actively informing on their neighbors. When Allied forces arrived in April 1945, these informants faced a choice: confess their role and face consequences, or stay silent and hope the evidence stayed buried. Most chose silence. The Allied military government lacked the resources to investigate every case. Denazification tribunals processed obvious targets, party officials, SS members, concentration camp personnel, but identifying civilian informants required detailed investigation of local records, time-consuming, expensive, and often the records had already been destroyed. The few informants who faced scrutiny received light sentences. Hans Müller, a shop owner who denounced 37 customers for anti-Nazi remarks, got 6 months in prison and a 1-year ban from commerce. After his release, he reopened his shop, business as usual. His victims, the ones who'd survived, shopped elsewhere. Some communities attempted local reckonings. In the Bavarian village of Oberammergau, residents compiled lists of wartime informants, public shaming, social ostracism. But these efforts faded as Reconstruction priorities took precedence. Building the new Germany required moving past the old grudges, even if that meant living alongside those who'd betrayed their neighbors. The silence had consequences. Victims of denunciation often found themselves living next door to their former tormentors. The teacher who'd reported a student's anti-Nazi joke continued teaching in the same school. The postal worker who'd opened private letters kept delivering mail. No acknowledgement, no apology, no accountability. This created a peculiar social dynamic. Everyone knew, but nobody spoke. Victims recognized their informants, but couldn't prove anything. Informants recognized their victims, but pretended nothing had happened. An entire society built on unspoken knowledge and collective amnesia. The Catholic Church provided cover for many former informants. Confession offered spiritual cleansing without earthly consequences. Father Joseph Berger, who'd served as chaplain to an SS unit, returned to his parish in 1948. His congregation, including Jews who'd survived deportation thanks to his reporting their hiding places, sat in his pews every Sunday. He preached forgiveness and redemption. They stayed silent. But the deeper story emerges in the bureaucracy. The Allies needed German administrators to run the occupation zones, food distribution, infrastructure repair, civil services. They couldn't run background checks on every clerk and secretary. So former Gestapo collaborators slipped into new roles, same desks, different flags on the wall. Otto Brenner managed informant networks in Cologne during the war. 347 denunciation cases passed through his office. After surrender, he destroyed the files and fled to his brother's farm in Bavaria. Allied investigators never found him. In 1947, he returned to Cologne with forged papers. New name, new identity. Got hired as a municipal housing official. Spent 26 years approving apartment applications for the same people he'd once helped persecute. The irony wasn't lost on survivors. Jakob Stern had been denounced by his neighbor Friedrich Koch in 1942 for listening to BBC radio. Spent 2 years in Dachau. Returned to find Koch working as a post-war police officer. Koch had traded his Nazi armband for a democratic badge. Same authority. Same neighborhood beat. Stern never filed a complaint. Who would believe him? If you value documented historical research like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the German Federal Archives and Stasi Records Archive. Now back to the story. Legal immunity became institutional. The West German government passed laws limiting prosecution of Nazi-era crimes, statutes of limitations, evidentiary requirements, administrative obstacles. By 1960, it was nearly impossible to prosecute civilian collaboration. The informants were safe, but memory lingered. In small towns across Germany, older residents whispered about wartime betrayals, who'd informed, who'd suffered. The knowledge passed between families like inherited shame. Children learned which neighbors couldn't be trusted, even if they never learned why. The economic miracle provided convenient distraction. Rebuilding required cooperation. Former informants and their victims worked side by side in factories and offices. The shared goal of prosperity superseded personal grievances, or so the official story claimed. Reality was messier. Industrial accidents happened. Promotions went to unexpected candidates. Business partnerships dissolved without explanation. The shadow networks of wartime collaboration influenced post-war life in subtle ways. Trust, once broken, stays broken. Consider the case of Ingrid Hoffmann, a secretary who'd typed denunciation reports for the Frankfurt Gestapo office. 712 cases, names, addresses, accusations, all in perfect typeface. After the war, she found work at an insurance company. Same skills, same attention to detail. Her supervisor. Hermann Klein didn't recognize her, but she recognized him. He'd been victim number 203. Denounced for making jokes about rationing. Spent 6 months in prison. Now he signed her paychecks. Klein never knew why Hoffmann always volunteered for overtime. Why she stayed late to refile his claims. Why his most difficult cases somehow got resolved quickly. guilt had made her the perfect employee. She worked twice as hard to compensate for sins he didn't know she'd committed. The recruitment networks adapted too. Former Gestapo handlers became corporate headhunters. They understood people, knew how to spot weakness, how to exploit vulnerability, how to build loyalty through fear and reward, skills transferable to any hierarchy. Klaus Weber had run a network of 43 informants in Dresden. Factory workers who reported on their colleagues, conversations. Office clerks who monitored their supervisors, activities. Students who informed on their professors. After the war, Weber reinvented himself as a personnel consultant. Major German corporations hired him to screen job applicants, build reliable workforces. He used the same psychological profiles he developed for the Gestapo. Same methods, different purpose. Weber's post-war success came from understanding human nature's dark side. People inform for money, for advancement, for protection, for revenge. The motivations don't change. Only the system channeling them changes. Industrial espionage became the new battlefield. Former informants found work in competitor intelligence, corporate security, market research. They gathered information legally now, but the instincts remained the same. Watch, listen, report. The surveillance state had trained them well. Educational systems absorbed many former collaborators. Teachers who'd reported students for anti-Nazi behavior became post-war educators. They understood classroom dynamics, how to maintain authority, how to spot troublemakers early. These skills made them valuable to school administrators trying to rebuild German education. Greta Muller had taught mathematics in Berlin during the war. Also reported 12 students and 3 colleagues to the Gestapo for subversive activities. 2 students died in camps. 1 teacher disappeared. After 1945, Muller moved to Hamburg, got hired at a girls' school, taught for 28 years, won teaching awards. Her students remembered her as strict but fair. They never knew about the children who'd never grown up to remember her at all. The medical profession provided another refuge. Doctors who'd collaborated with Nazi medical experiments found positions in post-war hospitals. Nurses who'd administered euthanasia drugs became pediatric caregivers. The Hippocratic Oath meant nothing to those who'd already violated it, but medical licenses were hard to verify across bombed-out territories. Many simply changed locations and continued practicing. Dr. Ernst Richter had selected victims for medical experiments at a Berlin psychiatric hospital. 47 patients died under his care. Official cause, natural deaths. Actual cause, lethal injections to test pain thresholds. After surrender, Richter fled to Austria. Established a private practice treating children. Parents trusted him, children liked him. He spent 34 years healing the same age group he'd once helped murder. Legal professionals faced harder transitions. Too many colleagues remembered their wartime activities. Too many records survived in court archives. But smaller towns needed judges and lawyers. Questions weren't asked if qualifications seemed adequate. Justice became a luxury communities couldn't afford during Reconstruction. Franz Becker had presided over racial courts in Munich, sentenced 89 people to concentration camps for violating race laws, mixed marriages, Jewish ancestry, forbidden relationships. After the war, he moved to a small Bavarian town, practiced family law, handled divorces, child custody cases, property disputes, the same legal system. Different laws, same power over people's lives. Banking absorbed many former collaborators too. The financial sector needed experienced professionals to handle reconstruction loans, Marshall Plan funding, currency reforms. Former Gestapo accountants who tracked Jewish assets became post-war bank managers. They understood how to move money, how to hide transactions, how to make wealth disappear, valuable skills in any economy. Heinrich Vogel had managed confiscated Jewish property in Vienna, real estate, business assets, personal belongings, everything cataloged, sold, redistributed to loyal Germans. After the war, Vogel established his own accounting firm, helped families recover wartime losses, submitted insurance claims for bombed properties, filed tax returns for displaced persons. Some clients never realized their accountant had once stolen from people just like them. The media provided sanctuary for skilled propagandists. Newspaper editors who'd written anti-Semitic articles became post-war journalists. Radio announcers who'd broadcast Nazi rally speeches hosted music programs. They understood mass communication, audience psychology, how to craft messages that persuaded. Democratic media needed these skills to compete with communist propaganda. Walter Jung had edited a Nazi newspaper in Dusseldorf. Daily circulation, 40,000. His editorials had called for harsher measures against Jews, more deportations, final solutions. After defeat, Jung disappeared for 3 years. Returned with new papers identifying him as a resistance sympathizer. Got hired by a democratic newspaper. Wrote articles promoting tolerance, human rights, international cooperation, Same typewriter, different message. Professional associations helped former collaborators find new roles. Medical societies, bar associations, teachers, unions, engineering groups, these organizations focused on credentials, not politics. If someone had the right degree, the right experience, the right references, questions about wartime activities seemed secondary to rebuilding professional standards. The construction industry needed architects and engineers to rebuild bombed cities. Former designers of concentration camps became housing developers, specialists in efficient layouts, cost-effective materials, standardized construction methods. They'd learned to build quickly and cheaply during the war. Peacetime construction used the same principles: maximum occupancy, minimum cost, human efficiency over human comfort. Gustav Stein had designed barracks for forced labor camps, 5 facilities across occupied Poland. Each housed 800 workers in spaces designed for 200. Maximum efficiency, minimum expense. After the war, Stein designed social housing in West German cities. Same principles. Cram families into minimum space. Keep construction costs low. House the maximum number of people in the smallest footprint. His post-war apartments won architectural awards for innovative use of limited space. By the 1970s, a new generation asked uncomfortable questions. Student protests, academic investigations, journalistic exposés. The children of informants discovered their parents' secrets. Some confronted family history. Others doubled down on denial. Either way, the silence began to crack. Television documentaries featured interviews with aging informants. Most refused to appear on camera. Those who agreed offered familiar justifications: fear for their families, pressure from authorities, patriotic duty. Everyone else was doing it. The excuses that had protected them for 30 years suddenly sounded hollow on national television. Grassroots memorial efforts gained momentum. Local historians compiled lists of wartime victims. Streets were renamed to honor the denounced rather than their denouncers. Slowly, communities began acknowledging their buried history. But by then, most of the informants were dead or dying. Justice delayed became justice denied. The Stasi files, opened after German reunification in 1990, revealed the final twist. East German secret police had recruited extensively from former Nazi informants. Same people, same methods, different ideology. The surveillance state had simply changed uniforms. Gustav Hermann exemplified the pattern. Gestapo informant in Dresden during the war. Reported 17 neighbors for anti-Nazi activities. 3 died in concentration camps. After 1945, Hermann reinvented himself as a communist true believer. The Stasi recruited him in 1952. He informed on 41 colleagues over the next 30 years. When the files opened, his victims finally learned who'd betrayed them. Hermann was 87 years old. Too old for prosecution, too old for anything except the truth. The numbers tell the final story. Of the estimated 2 to 4 million Germans who informed for the Nazi state, fewer than 800 faced prosecution after the war. Success rate: under 0.02%, the vast majority lived normal lives, raised families, drew pensions, died peacefully in their beds. Their victims weren't so fortunate. Many never recovered from the betrayal. Trust shattered, communities fractured, relationships poisoned by suspicion. The informants destroyed more than individual lives. They shredded the social fabric that holds communities together. Today, German archives contain fragments of the surveillance state, partial files, incomplete records, bits and pieces of a system that once monitored every conversation, every gesture, every whisper of dissent. Researchers estimate 90% of the documentation has been lost or destroyed. With it went the names of most informants. But one discovery changes everything. In 2019, construction workers renovating a building in Frankfurt found a sealed room behind a false wall. Inside, 17 filing cabinets containing complete Gestapo informant records from 1933 to 1945. Every name, every address, every denunciation letter. The archive nobody knew existed, the evidence that survived. The files are being digitized now, cross-referenced with post-war records. The informants may have escaped earthly justice, but they couldn't escape history. Their names are being added to the record, their betrayals documented, their victims, stories told. After 75 years of silence, the whispers finally have names.